Labour safe seat for generations. Do you think you stand a chance of winning it back, or winning it?
I think we stand an excellent chance, either making serious dent into the Labour majority, which, as you know, was, I think it was 48% at the last election in 2010. And the majority for Labour has slowly decreased over the last 20 years, election by election. I think, contrary to what a lot of people have this kind of image of us appealing to Tory seats in the south, when you actually get out on the doorsteps, there's an awful lot of people that actually approach us, young blue-collar workers, say that they're voting for us, that their families are voting for us, and our results last year, as you know, in the European elections, 4.1 million people voted for us, and we won hands down.
Well, we'll get to the sort of demographic for UKIP later, if that's okay. But what changes could UKIP bring to Preston and more widely to the northwest?
In terms of the infrastructure, I think people are very frustrated with what they see as vanity projects by Preston Council or the Preston administration. It's all very well having front of house, but it's all the infrastructure around the city is, you know, poor roads. There's a lot more that could be done with the park, Avenham, bringing a lot more private investment into there, because as we know, since the lottery funding has kind of re-established the park to its former glory, we could recreate a situation like you've got in Richmond. There's no reason why not. But I think basically...
What kind of vanity projects are these?
At the city centre in particular. We've seen an awful lot of money spent on the city centre with the roads, which are a little bit hit and miss. So I think it's all very well having your flagship appearance, which is the city, but I think if you look at the major road that comes into town from the M55, it's pretty much like Benghazi in places, which for the A6 is not great.
So for voters in Preston, what would you say are the top sort of 2 or 3 things that you could that they could noticeably change?
Well, first of all, which is our national policy, we would abolish car park charges at the hospitals, especially the Royal Preston, which is a nightmare. We feel that it's an unfair tax on patients and visitors, which is completely unnecessary, and also more restructuring of the budgets to local organisations. I think we have to look at the council taking on social care as well to take the burden off the national health in Preston. But I think more investment in local communities, and from my point of view, certainly somebody that lives and works in the constituency rather than drops in now and again.
Do you know how you budget for that?
Well, the national budget or the local budget?
The local budget, when you're talking about the how you want to abolish car park charges, especially for workers in hospital, where's that money going to come from? Because obviously so many key line services are suffering so much already.
Well, in terms of the car park charges, we would cut the council tax by 10 pence, and that would go in coordination with the government funding budget that is available, the grant that is available. So we would use that money to subsidise. Well, the car parks themselves don't need to be paid for anyway. That is a decision taken by the local NHS that they charge. That is something that doesn't need to be budgeted for because it's an extra income for them, which I understand the pressures that are on them, but we can come to that in a minute.
Well, as we've seen earlier, people have died in the past for their right to vote in a sort of democratic society. And yet we found statistics that just 60% of people in the northwest registered to vote in the last general election. I think Manchester Central, in fact, had the lowest turnout in the whole of the country. So do you think people are taking it for granted now? Is that the problem?
No, I think low voter turnout very much suits the Lib Long Con establishment, because the the margin is so small in certain seats that they're looking at swing voters. I think what the pollsters are concerned about is the fact that they cannot account for people that haven't voted for 20 or 30 years, students that haven't voted. For instance, in May 2010, 600,000 voters, students, voted for the Lib Dems on a number of promises, neither of which they delivered on. So I think the younger generation and the older generation that haven't voted hopefully will be motivated by what happened in Scotland in the in-out, which was 81%.
Yeah, so how are you and other candidates standing for UKIP? How are you trying to encourage more people to vote?
Well, we're saying that there's time for change, and we've got radical policies. Well, they might be seen radical in the UK, but they're not in Sweden and Denmark and Norway and Germany, where there is coalition government. There is more inclusiveness, and there is a fairer democratic system, which is of course what the Lib Dems promised in 2010, proportional representation. If that was the case, then other parties would be represented and people that voted would be represented.
So you're in favour of that system over first past the post?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And we spoke about the demographic that UKIP reaches earlier, but a study by the University of Liverpool found recently the vast majority of UKIP supporters are white working class males, and they are politically pessimistic and distrusting. So how could you represent the whole of Preston and Farage the whole nation when your policies seem to only be targeting a small portion of the electorate?
Well, I think that again is media misinformation. If you look at our policies.
But this was a study. This was a study by the university based on the figures.
Yeah, there were a lot of other studies as well done by 2 or 3 different universities on. We have the fastest growing youth wing of any political party in the United Kingdom. So I think it's a bit misleading sometimes. As Nigel would say, you know, they're not. You don't have the cigar smoking colonels in the shires up in the northwest. I campaigned in Haywood and Middleton, and some of my Labour council friends thought that we wouldn't get the cut into the majority that we did. I said that it will be less than 1,000. In fact, I think they ended up with just over 600 as a majority out of 10,000. So that shows you that our policies reach out to everybody from different walks of society.
But it's interesting because I spoke with MEP Paul Nuttall for UKIP, and I put the same question to him, and he said that actually UKIP don't want to dilute their policies, because that's obviously the exact opposite of what UKIP stands for, something different, something stronger. And if they'd have to dilute their policies to reach more people, then it wouldn't be worth it, and that the people that they're reaching, the white working class males, they deserve to be represented in the House of Commons just as much as anyone else. So is there conflict within the party then about who you're actually trying to reach?
No, not at all. I mean, if you look at our policies and the kind of people that are not only joining the party but backing us stretch from, as you've seen on our videos, from graduates at 17, 18, 19 to blue-collar workers in the 40s and 50s. So I think the concerning thing for the establishment is that we reach out to everybody from every background, every social democratic background, but people that do not have any faith whatsoever in the Westminster elite anymore. It's too cosy, it's not representative. Of course they want to retain the political voting system that they've got because it favours them, but it doesn't favour the electorate, and we're concerned about the people that vote for us more than personalities. And as we've seen over the last 20 years, people have left politics to make themselves large fortunes. That's certainly not what I've come into politics for.
And do you really think that small parties can make a big impact this time round with the current voting system?
Well, with the current voting system, as you know, it's going to be very difficult. I think, like Paul said and Nigel, I think we're going to have an awful lot of second positions because the first past the post is what it is. It's very difficult to get over that, but I think what UKIP and certainly the Greens as well want to establish is, you know, a real push for proportional representation.
So we've heard a lot that a lot of people are starting to be a little bit put off UKIP, worrying that, you know, it might be a racist party, it might be sexist, homophobic, all these stories are coming out. What would you say to voters in Preston?
Well, I would say look at our videos, look at our website, look at the people that are talking about it. I've been in the party now for 18 months. I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of, quite a bit of personal time with Nigel. I've also been to the conferences, the national conferences, the think tanks, and there isn't any racism.
But it is kind of hard to argue that. I will stop you there, because obviously you've had a councillor suspended for saying that floods were due to same-sex marriage being legalised. You had an MEP saying too much aid was being sent to bongo land. And then obviously Farage recently saying that he wants to get rid of anti-discrimination legislation. So that doesn't really do much to strengthen that point.
Well, I think it does. I think if you look at the fact that those people were dismissed within 24 hours, if you look
Farage hasn't been dismissed, if I'm not mistaken.
No, Nigel Farage hasn't, but what was the question regarding Nigel?
Recently he's been saying that he wants to get rid of much of the discrimination legislation in the UK.
Yeah, no, he didn't. What he actually said, he wanted British jobs for British workers, which is exactly what...
I think the exact question Trevor Phillips asked him, do you think we have too much discrimination legislation in this country? To which he replied yes, and he said he would get rid of much of it.
He's talking about discrimination for people within the EU. That's what the point he was trying to make. And going back to the point, Gordon Brown stated that he wanted British jobs for British workers in 2009. So why is there the furore amongst the media about that now, with Nigel stating exactly the same as Gordon Brown said in 2009? I don't understand it.
But these discrimination laws, or anti-discrimination laws, they protect a lot more than just EU workers. They protect against colour, against gender.
Yeah, but if you look at the text and you look at the interview that Nigel gave, he said that for every British worker, black, white, irrespective of colour, they should be given the opportunity over workers from the EU, who incidentally are Caucasian and white. So it's absolutely nothing to do with colour. It's just yet another angle that the media try and throw at us, which is untrue.
But did he not say that it was unnecessary to protect against gender discrimination and race discrimination?
No, nothing to do with race and nothing to do with gender. He's looking to...
But he said that we don't necessarily need these, we don't need this legislation anymore because it's kind of unnecessary.
He's talking about having a British Bill of Rights rather than an EU diktat. That's his point. And a lot of the EU diktat is quite honestly in favour of workers from outside Britain against us, so we're being discriminated against. And if you look at the latest poll of Federation of Businesses, that 49% of them support what Nigel has said.
So do you think it's necessary then for workers in Preston to be protected under legislation when they're going for a job, when it comes to where they were born, or when it comes to whether or not they're male or female?
No, if they're British citizens, they should be given the opportunity first.
So do you think it should be a law to protect them?
Well, we've not decided on policy. That will be in the manifesto, which is due to come out. I mean, obviously, I'm not on the national executive, but the crux of the matter is that what Nigel said quite clearly is that British workers, irrespective of creed, colour, background, religion, should be given the opportunity first for jobs over those from the EU.
He did make that point, and I would agree 100% that it is being sort of taken out of context by the media. But I am just wondering that he said that this legislation isn't necessary. And the reason that I would argue that is because a study just last year found that a quarter of women in the UK have experienced gender discrimination in the workplace. And obviously there was a very high calibre investigation a couple of years ago that showed that people born in the UK and UK residents, they would, people with British names progressed in the workplace a lot more than people with Asian or African names. So how can we argue that that legislation isn't needed?
Well, that's under the current coalition. That's not under UKIP. So you'd really have to ask...
But he'd be wanting to abolish that. That's what he did say quite clearly in that interview.
No, he said he wanted to introduce a British Bill of Rights, and that's dependent on us leaving the EU. At the moment, we're dictated to by EU policy. 75% of the laws are made in Europe, not over here.
Okay, brilliant. Well, James Barker, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.